When my son Tyler said pay rent or get out, I smiled because I'd just inherited $2 million from my late aunt's estate. What he didn't know is that while he was calculating how to squeeze money from his own mother, I was sitting on enough wealth to buy his entire neighborhood. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The kitchen table felt cold against my palms as I stared at my 32-year-old son, trying to process the words that had just come out of his mouth. The same mouth I'd fed countless times when he was teething, the same lips I'd kissed when he scraped his knees, the same voice that used to call me Mama, with such love and trust. "Did you just ask me to pay rent?" I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "In the house I've been helping you pay the mortgage on for the past 3 years." Tyler didn't even look up from his laptop, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather. "It's not asking, Mom. It's telling. Vanessa and I talked about it, and we think it's time you start contributing more or find somewhere else to live." Vanessa. His girlfriend of 8 months who'd moved into my son's house. The house I'd co-signed for. The house I'd helped furnish. The house where I'd been living peacefully for 2 years after my husband passed away. The same Vanessa who hadn't worked a day since she'd arrived, spending her time redecorating rooms and hosting her friends for expensive wine tastings that I somehow always ended up cleaning up after. "Tyler," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "I've been buying groceries for this entire household. I cook dinner 6 nights a week. I clean. I do laundry. I watch Buster when you're out of town." Buster, their golden retriever puppy, who had somehow become my responsibility despite never being consulted about getting a dog in the first place. He finally looked up, his eyes cold in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of his father during our worst arguments. "That's not the same as paying your fair share, Mom. This is prime real estate in Willowbrook Heights. Do you know what a room here would rent for on the open market? Prime real estate." My son was talking about charging his widowed mother market rates to live in a house she'd helped him buy. The same son who'd lived in my basement until he was 27, rent-free, while he figured out his career path. "What's brought this on?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "Vanessa thinks," he started, then caught himself. "We think it's time for you to be more independent. You're 59, Mom, you're not that old. You could get a job, maybe find your own place, it would be good for you." Good for me. Or good for Vanessa, who'd been making increasingly pointed comments about privacy and space for starting a family ever since she'd moved in. The same Vanessa who'd somehow convinced Tyler that his mother's presence was an obstacle to their happiness, rather than the support system that had made their comfortable lifestyle possible. I thought about the letter sitting in my bedroom drawer upstairs, the letter from Rothwell, Hartman and Associates that had arrived just 3 days ago, informing me that my great-aunt Cordelia's estate had finally cleared probate. Aunt Cordelia, the family eccentric who'd never married, never had children, and had spent her life traveling the world and collecting art. The aunt everyone thought was barely scraping by, living in that modest cottage in Rosemere Village. What they didn't know, what none of us had known, was that Aunt Cordelia had been quietly brilliant with investments. That modest cottage sat on land worth $800,000. Her worthless art collection had been appraised at $600,000, and her investment portfolio, carefully managed over 5 decades, was worth another $600,000. $2 million. Plus the house, plus the art, plus various other assets that brought the total inheritance to nearly $2.5 million. All left to me, her dear niece Evelyn, who always remembered to call on birthdays and never asked for anything in return. I'd been planning to tell Tyler about the inheritance, to share my good fortune with my only child. I'd imagined us celebrating together, maybe taking a family vacation, perhaps helping him pay off the rest of his mortgage early. I'd even thought about setting aside money for his future children's education. But sitting here, listening to him calculate what he could charge his own mother for the privilege of continuing to take care of him and his girlfriend, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't about money or space or independence. This was about respect. And Tyler was showing me exactly how much respect he had for the woman who'd raised him alone after his father walked out when he was 12. How much? I asked simply. How much what? How much rent do you want me to pay? Tyler's fingers returned to his keyboard and I could see him pulling up rental websites. Market rate for a room in this area with shared kitchen and living space privileges would be about $1,200 a month. But since you're family, we'd only charge you $800. $800. Plus, no doubt, I'd still be expected to contribute to groceries, utilities, and continue my unpaid role as household manager and dog caretaker. They wanted to charge me for the privilege of being their live-in maid. That seems reasonable, I said, my voice eerily calm. Tyler looked up, surprised by my easy acceptance. Really? I thought you'd put up more of a fight. No fight here, I said, standing up from the table. When do you want me to start paying? Well, ideally at the beginning of next month. That gives you 2 weeks to figure out your finances. 2 weeks. He was giving me 2 weeks to figure out how to come up with $800 plus living expenses on my modest widow's pension and part-time job at the Pinehurst Community Center. What he didn't know was that I'd already figured out my finances. They were much, much better than he could possibly imagine. And if I can't come up with the money? I asked, though I was curious about his answer rather than worried about the scenario. Tyler shrugged, that same casual indifference that had marked this entire conversation. Then you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Vanessa's been looking at apartments online. There are some nice senior living communities in Maplewood that aren't too expensive. Senior living communities. At 59. Because apparently being a widow who needed time to grieve and rebuild meant I was ready to be warehoused with people decades older than me. The dismissiveness was breathtaking. I see, I said. Well, I guess I better start making some phone calls. As I headed toward the stairs, Tyler called after me. Mom, I hope you understand this isn't personal. It's just, Vanessa and I are trying to build a life together, and we need our space. I paused on the bottom step, my hand gripping the banister. I understand perfectly, Tyler. You're building a life together. And you've decided that life doesn't include room for the woman who sacrificed everything to give you the foundation you're standing on. That's not fair, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Fair, I repeated softly. We'll see what fair looks like. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I could hear Vanessa's key in the front door, followed by her bright, cheerful voice calling out, Honey, I'm home. Did you talk to your mom about the rent situation? Yes, he had talked to his mom about the rent situation. And his mom was about to show him exactly what happened when you treated someone like a burden instead of a blessing. $2 million was about to teach my son a lesson in respect that I should have taught him years ago. But first, I had some phone calls to make. And not the kind Tyler was expecting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the inheritance letter from Rothwell, Hartman & Associates, the legal firm's letterhead embossed in gold against cream-colored paper. The numbers still didn't feel real, even after reading them for the dozenth time since it arrived 3 days ago. Dear Miss Evelyn Catherine Morrison, we are pleased to inform you that as the sole beneficiary of the estate of Cordelia Beatrice Ashworth, you have inherited assets totaling $2,487,000. $2.5 million. From the aunt, everyone in the family had pitied, the eccentric spinster who never seemed to have 2 nickels to rub together. While we'd all been worried about her living alone in that tiny cottage, she'd been quietly building a fortune that would make Tyler's tech startup salary look like pocket change. The irony was almost poetic. Here I was, being told by my own son that I needed to pay rent or find somewhere else to live. while sitting on enough money to buy his precious house 3 times over. A knock on my bedroom door interrupted my thoughts. "Mom?" Tyler's voice carried a note of what almost sounded like guilt. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart," I said, quickly sliding the letter back into its envelope and placing it in my nightstand drawer. Tyler entered, looking uncomfortable in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. He perched on the edge of my reading chair, avoiding direct eye contact. "Look, about earlier," he began, running his hands through his sandy brown hair, a nervous habit he'd inherited from his father. "I know it probably sounded harsh, but Vanessa and I were really trying to make this work, and she feels like—" "Like what?" I asked gently, though I was genuinely curious to hear how he'd justify this. "Like she can't really make this place feel like home with you here. Not because she doesn't like you," he added quickly, "but because it's hard to feel like the woman of the house when your mother-in-law is doing all the cooking and cleaning." Mother-in-law. They weren't even engaged, but Vanessa had apparently claimed that title. And the cooking and cleaning I did out of love and habit was now being framed as territorial invasion. "I see," I said. "So the solution is to charge me rent for the privilege of continuing to take care of both of you?" Tyler winced. "When you put it like that, it sounds terrible." "How would you put it?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I guess I want you to be happy, Mom. Really happy. Not just taking care of other people all the time. When's the last time you did something just for yourself?" The question caught me off guard because it was so unexpectedly thoughtful. When was the last time I'd done something just for myself? Before David died, certainly. Before I'd moved in here to help Tyler get on his feet. Before I'd spent the last 2 years putting everyone else's needs before my own, just like I'd done for most of my adult life. "That's a fair question," I admitted. "But Tyler, honey, taking care of the people I love doesn't make me unhappy. What makes me unhappy is feeling like that care isn't valued or appreciated." "It is appreciated," he said quickly. "I appreciate everything you do. It's just that Vanessa doesn't." Tyler's silence was answer enough. I looked at my son, really looked at him. At 32, he was successful, handsome, intelligent, but sitting there, fidgeting like a child caught between loyalties. I saw something that broke my heart a little. He was so eager to please his girlfriend that he was willing to hurt his mother to do it. "Tyler," I said softly, "do you remember when you were 8 and you wanted that expensive gaming console for Christmas? The one that cost more than our grocery budget for 2 months?" He nodded, looking confused by the apparent change of subject. "I worked extra shifts at the hospital for 3 months, picking up every overtime opportunity I could get. Double shifts, holiday shifts, overnight shifts that left me exhausted for days. But I wanted you to have that console, because I could see how much it meant to you." "I remember," he said quietly. "You were always working that winter. Do you remember what you said when you opened it Christmas morning?" A small smile crossed his face. "I said you were the best mom in the world and that I'd take care of you when I grew up." "That's right. You promised to take care of me." I paused, letting that sink in. "So tell me, Tyler, charging your widowed mother rent so your girlfriend can feel more comfortable, is that what taking care of me looks like?" The color drained from his face. "Mom, It's okay," I said, standing up from the bed. "You've shown me exactly where I stand in your life. And you know what? You're absolutely right about one thing. It is time for me to do something just for myself." Tyler looked up hopefully. "So you'll start looking for your own place?" I smiled, and for the first time in days it was genuine. "Oh, I'm definitely going to be making some changes. Big changes." "Really? That's great, Mom." "I know it seems scary, but I think once you're in your own space, living your own life, you'll be so much happier." If only he knew how happy I was about to be. "I've already started making some phone calls," I said, which was technically true. I'd called the law firm that morning to schedule an appointment to discuss my inheritance. "That's amazing. See, I knew you had it in you to be independent." Independent. The word almost made me laugh. I'd been independent my entire adult life. I'd raised him alone after his father abandoned us. I'd worked full-time while going to nursing school. I'd bought my own house, paid my own bills, made my own decisions. The only thing I hadn't been independent from was the desire to help my son succeed. But that was about to change. "Tyler," I said, walking over to him and placing my hands on his shoulders the way I used to when he was small and needed comfort. "I want you to know that I don't blame you for this. You're trying to build a life with someone you care about, and that's exactly what you should be doing." Relief flooded his features. "Thank you for understanding, Mom. I really hoped you would." "But I also want you to understand something," I continued, my voice gentle but firm. "Relationships built on excluding the people who love you most rarely end up being the fairy tale you hope for." "What do you mean?" "I mean that anyone who asks you to choose between them and your family, really choose, not just set healthy boundaries, is telling you something important about their character. And someday, when you really need support, you might find that the people you pushed away for them aren't there anymore." Tyler's brow furrowed. "Vanessa didn't ask me to choose, didn't she?" I asked softly. "She wanted me gone, Tyler, not contributing differently, not setting new boundaries, gone. And you agreed to make that happen by making my life here untenable." The truth of that settled over him slowly, and I could see the moment he realized what he'd actually agreed to do. "I don't want you gone, Mom," he said quietly. I want everyone to be happy." "I know you do, sweetheart, and you know what? I'm going to be very, very happy. Happier than you can possibly imagine." As I watched him leave my room, shoulders slumped with the weight of choices he was only beginning to understand, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not sadness, not anger, but a crystal-clear sense of purpose. Tomorrow, I would drive to Rothwell, Hartman & Associates, and begin the process of claiming my inheritance. But tonight, I was going to do something I should have done long ago. I was going to stop being the woman who sacrificed everything for people who saw those sacrifices as expectations rather than gifts. The moment of defiance had arrived, and it felt like freedom. The law offices of Rothwell, Hartman & Associates occupied the top 3 floors of the Grandview Tower in downtown Millfield, all marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city below. I felt underdressed in my simple navy blazer and sensible flats as I stepped off the elevator, but the receptionist's warm smile immediately put me at ease. "Ms. Morrison, Mr. Rothwell is ready to see you." Jonathan Rothwell was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded me of my late father. His office was lined with leather-bound books and family photographs, giving it a warmth that contradicted the intimidating grandeur of the building. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair across from his mahogany desk. "I must say, your aunt was quite a remarkable woman. I had the pleasure of handling her affairs for nearly 20 years. "I'm still having trouble believing all of this is real," I admitted, settling into the chair. "Aunt Cordelia always seemed so modest." Mr. Rothwell chuckled. "Cordelia was many things, but modest about her intelligence was not one of them. She just preferred to keep her financial success private. She used to say that money made people act foolish, and she had no interest in dealing with foolish people." He opened a thick folder on his desk, revealing documents that would change my life forever. "Your aunt began investing in the 1970s when she inherited a small sum from her father. Nothing substantial, maybe $50,000. But she had an exceptional mind for spotting trends and undervalued assets." As he spread out papers detailing stock portfolios, real estate holdings, and art acquisitions, I began to understand the scope of what Aunt Cordelia had accomplished. She hadn't just been lucky, she'd been brilliant. "This painting here," Mr. Rothwell pointed to a photograph of a small abstract piece I remembered hanging in her living room. "She bought it in 1983 from a struggling artist in Portland for $200. Last month, it was appraised at $180,000. My mouth fell open. "That little painting? I thought it was just something she picked up at a local gallery." "She did. But the artist was Marcus Whitfield, and his work has become incredibly sought after since his death in 2018. Your aunt had dozens of pieces like this, small investments in artists, neighborhoods, and companies that she believed had potential. He showed me page after page of documentation. The cottage in Rosemere Village that everyone thought was just a quaint family home, it sat on 3.2 acres in what had become one of the most desirable areas in the county, now worth $850,000. The stock portfolio she'd built over 50 years, a diversified collection of blue-chip stocks, tech companies she'd invested in before they became household names, and international funds that had grown to $1.2 million. But perhaps most impressive, Mr. Rothwell continued, was her real estate acumen. She owned rental properties in 4 different states, all purchased before their respective areas became gentrified. The rental income alone was generating $180,000 per year. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. Why didn't anyone in the family know about this? Because your aunt specifically didn't want them to know. She left detailed instructions about her reasoning. He pulled out a handwritten letter. Would you like me to read her explanation? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He cleared his throat and began reading in a gentle tone. I have watched my family for 78 years, and I have learned that money reveals character rather than creating it. My nieces and nephews have spent decades treating me like the poor relation, pitying my simple lifestyle while never bothering to actually get to know me as a person. They remember my birthday when it's convenient and visit when they need something. Only Evelyn has consistently shown genuine care without any expectation of return. She calls to check on me, remembers the little things that matter to me, and treats me like family rather than an obligation. If my money is going to anyone, it should go to the one person who loved me when she thought I had nothing to give. Tears blurred my vision as Mr. Rothwell finished reading. Aunt Cordelia had been watching, evaluating, judging character all along. And somehow, without even trying, I had passed a test I didn't know I was taking. There's more, Mr. Rothwell said gently, handing me tissues from a box on his desk. She wanted you to know that she chose you not just because of your kindness, but because she believed you had the wisdom to use this inheritance well. She was quite specific about that. He pulled out another document, this one typed on legal letterhead. She left a letter specifically for you, to be read after you'd been informed of the full extent of the inheritance. With trembling hands, I took the envelope marked with my name in Aunt Cordelia's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter dated just 6 months before her death. My dearest Evelyn, I read aloud, my voice shaking. If you're reading this, then you've learned about my little secret. I hope you're sitting down. I know this must come as quite a shock, but I want you to understand why I chose you for this responsibility. Over the years, I've watched you sacrifice again and again for people who take your generosity for granted. You worked yourself to exhaustion raising Tyler alone. You put your own dreams on hold to help him through college. You moved in with him to help with his mortgage, and I suspect you're still putting his needs before your own. This inheritance is not just money, darling. It's freedom. Freedom to say no to people who don't appreciate you. Freedom to choose yourself for once. Freedom to discover who Evelyn Morrison is when she's not busy taking care of everyone else. But most importantly, it's proof that someone in this world recognized your worth, even when you couldn't see it yourself. I had to stop reading, overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't name. Mr. Rothwell waited patiently while I composed myself. She was right about everything, I whispered. About Tyler, about my sacrifices, about all of it. Cordelia was rarely wrong about people, he said kindly. She had an uncanny ability to see through facades and understand true character. That's partly why she was so successful with her investments. She could spot authenticity in businesses the same way she could in people. I continued reading. I know you well enough to know that your first instinct will be to share this windfall with Tyler and probably help him buy a bigger house or start his own business. Please resist that urge, at least initially. Let this inheritance sit with you for a while. See how people treat you when they think you have nothing to offer them. You might be surprised by what you learn. And remember, money doesn't change who you are. It just gives you the power to be who you really are without compromise. Use that power wisely, but don't be afraid to use it. All my love, Aunt Cordelia. Mr. Rothwell was organizing the paperwork while I finished the letter. The probate process is complete, and all assets have been transferred to accounts in your name. This includes checking and savings accounts totaling $2.3 million, the investment portfolio worth approximately $1.2 million, the property in Rosemere Village valued at $850,000, and the art collection appraised at $600,000. There are also smaller assets, jewelry, collectibles, and some international investments that bring the total estate value to just over $5.2 million. $5.2 million. The number was so large I couldn't process it. Yesterday I was worried about coming up with $800 for rent. Today, I was worth more than Tyler's entire social circle combined. What happens now? I asked. Now, you decide what kind of life you want to live, Mr. Rothwell said with a smile. Though I'd recommend taking Cordelia's advice about waiting before making any major decisions. In my experience, people often reveal their true character when they think you're vulnerable. It might be educational to see how your family treats you over the next few weeks. As I walked out of the law office with a briefcase full of documents and account information, I felt like I was floating. The woman who had entered that building an hour ago had been worried about her future, dependent on her son's goodwill, treated like a burden. The woman leaving was independently wealthy, powerful, and completely free to make her own choices. But the most remarkable part wasn't the money itself. It was the knowledge that someone had seen my worth when I couldn't see it myself. Aunt Cordelia had watched me for years, evaluating not just my character but my potential, and she had decided I was worthy of this enormous gift. For the first time in my adult life, I had the power to choose myself first. And thanks to Aunt Cordelia's wisdom, I was about to learn exactly who deserved to be in my life when I finally started using that power. The real education was about to begin. I drove home from the law office in a daze, the briefcase containing documentation of my newfound wealth sitting on the passenger seat like a ticking time bomb. Every red light gave me another moment to process the enormity of what had just happened. $5.2 million. The number felt surreal, like something that happened to other people in movies or lottery commercials. By the time I pulled into Tyler's driveway, though I was beginning to think of it differently now, I had made a decision. Aunt Cordelia's advice echoed in my mind. Let people show you who they really are when they think you have nothing to offer them. The next few weeks would be an education in human nature, starting with my own son. The house felt different as I walked through the front door. Everything looked exactly the same. The beige leather sectional that I'd helped Tyler pick out, the coffee table I'd assembled myself because he was too busy with work, the throw pillows I'd bought to make the space feel more homey. But I was seeing it all through new eyes. This wasn't my home anymore. It was a place where I was now expected to pay rent for the privilege of being treated like hired help. "Mom? That you?" Tyler's voice called from the kitchen. I found him standing at the counter, eating a sandwich over the sink while scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when I entered. "How did your errands go?" he asked absently, taking another bite of what appeared to be the last of the turkey I'd bought for the household 3 days ago. "Very enlightening," I said, setting my purse down carefully on the counter. The briefcase remained in my car, too risky to bring inside where curious eyes might wonder about its contents. "Good. Good." Tyler finally glanced up, his expression brightening artificially. "Actually, I'm glad you're here. Vanessa and I wanted to talk to you about the timeline for the rent situation." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Yeah, we were thinking that maybe starting next month might be a little rushed. Vanessa suggested we give you 6 weeks to get your finances in order. Find a way to come up with the deposit and first month's rent." How generous of them. 6 weeks to scramble together money I didn't have for the privilege of continuing to subsidize their lifestyle. That's very considerate of Vanessa, I said, my voice neutral. Was this her idea? Tyler nodded enthusiastically. She really wants this to work out, Mom. She's not trying to push you out or anything. She just thinks some structure might be good for everyone. Structure. That was an interesting way to frame extortion. And what happens if I can't come up with the money in 6 weeks? I asked, genuinely curious about their backup plan. Tyler's expression grew uncomfortable. Well, we'd have to explore other options. But I'm sure it won't come to that. You're resourceful, you'll figure something out. Resourceful. Yes, I certainly was more resourceful than he could possibly imagine. Actually, Tyler continued, warming to his subject, Vanessa had some really great ideas about ways you could increase your income. There's a home healthcare agency in Pinehurst that's always looking for experienced nurses. The pay isn't amazing, but with your experience, you could probably get 30 hours a week. 30 hours a week at what was likely $18 an hour, if I was lucky. That would give me enough to pay their rent demand and perhaps eat occasionally. Meanwhile, I'd still be expected to maintain my current contributions to the household: cooking, cleaning, dog care, and general life management for 2 adults who apparently couldn't function without me. What about my job at the community center? I asked. Oh, you'd probably have to give that up, Tyler said with a casual wave of his hand. This would pay better, and you need to prioritize earning money right now. I'd been working at the Pinehurst Community Center for 8 months, helping coordinate programs for seniors and teaching basic computer skills. It was work that fulfilled me, that gave me purpose, beyond domestic servitude. But apparently my personal satisfaction was less important than ensuring I could afford to live in their basement. I see, I said. And this was Vanessa's suggestion? She's just trying to help, Mom. She wants you to succeed. The front door opened, and speak of the devil, Vanessa herself walked in carrying shopping bags from Nordstrom and Pottery Barn. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite a day of shopping, and she wore a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than I made in a month at the community center. Evelyn, she exclaimed with false brightness, Tyler told me you two had a chance to talk about the timeline. I hope you're feeling more positive about everything. It's certainly given me a lot to think about, I replied. Vanessa set her bags down and immediately began pulling out purchases: decorative candles, throw blankets, a small sculpture that looked like it belonged in a modern art museum. All things to make the house more to her liking, purchased while discussing my financial struggles with my son. I was just telling Mom about your idea for the home health care job, Tyler said, wrapping his arms around Vanessa from behind. Oh yes, Vanessa's eyes lit up. I did some research, and there's such a need for experienced caregivers. The agency I found pays really competitively, and with your background, I'm sure they'd love to have you. I watched her arrange her new purchases on the counter, each item carefully positioned for maximum visual impact. That's very thoughtful of you to research job opportunities for me. Of course, we're family now, she beamed at Tyler, who squeezed her tighter. I want what's best for everyone, and honestly, I think having your own source of income will give you such a sense of independence and purpose. Independence and purpose. From the woman who hadn't worked a day since moving in, whose sense of purpose seemed to revolve around spending Tyler's money and redecorating his house. Speaking of independence, Tyler said, we were also thinking about some other adjustments that might help with the transition. What kind of adjustments? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I didn't want to hear the answer. Vanessa and Tyler exchanged a look, one of those wordless communications that couples develop when they've discussed something extensively in private. Well, Vanessa said carefully, once you're paying rent, we thought it might make sense to establish some clearer boundaries around shared spaces and responsibilities. Meaning? Meaning that the current arrangement where you do most of the cooking and cleaning might not make sense anymore, Tyler explained. If you're paying to live here like a tenant, you shouldn't be expected to take care of the whole household like Well, like you have been. Like a mother. He couldn't bring himself to say it, but that's what he meant. If I was paying rent like a tenant, I wouldn't be expected to take care of them like a mother. So you'd prefer to handle your own meals and cleaning? I asked. Exactly, Vanessa said brightly. It would give us all more independence. You could have your own shelf in the refrigerator, your own cabinet space, maybe even your own nights to use the kitchen. My own shelf in the refrigerator. In the house where I'd been buying groceries and cooking meals for 2 years. They wanted to charge me rent and then limit my access to the kitchen I'd been maintaining. And what about Buster? I asked, referring to their golden retriever, who had somehow become my responsibility. Another look passed between them. Well, we were hoping you could still help with him, Tyler said. I mean, you're here during the day anyway, and he's so attached to you. So I'd be paying $800 a month, working 30 hours a week at a job I didn't want, eating meals in isolation but still expected to care for their dog because it was convenient for them. This all sounds very structured, I said. We just want everyone to be happy, Vanessa said, her smile never wavering. Clear expectations, fair arrangements. It's really the most mature way to handle a multi-generational living situation. Multi-generational living situation. She made it sound like a sociological experiment rather than a family home. And you've thought this through completely? I asked. Oh yes, Tyler said. We want to make sure this works for everyone long term. Long term. They were planning my life years into the future, assuming I'd be grateful for the opportunity to pay them for the privilege of being marginalized in what had been my sanctuary for 2 years. Well, I said, picking up my purse, I certainly have a lot to consider. As I headed toward the stairs, Vanessa called after me. Oh, Evelyn, I picked up some brochures today from that home healthcare agency. They're on the counter if you want to look them over. I turned back to see her pointing to a small stack of glossy pamphlets she'd placed next to her new candles. She'd spent her shopping day gathering information about my future employment while purchasing luxury items for her nest. How thoughtful, I said. I'll be sure to review them carefully. In my room, I sat on the bed and pulled out my phone. I had 6 weeks, according to their generous timeline, to figure out my financial situation. What they didn't know was that my financial situation had been figured out quite thoroughly by a lawyer that morning. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Dr. Patricia Hendricks, a friend from my nursing days who now ran a private practice specializing in geriatric care. If I was going to play this game, I needed to understand all my options. Patricia, it's Evelyn Morrison. I hope I'm not calling too late. Evelyn, what a lovely surprise. How are you, dear? I'm equisable, thank you. Actually, I was hoping to ask you about something. What do you know about the job market for experienced nurses in private care? Are you thinking about getting back into nursing? I thought you were enjoying your work at the community center. I am, but circumstances may require some adjustments to my income situation. We talked for 20 minutes about opportunities, pay scales, and working conditions in private healthcare. What I learned was enlightening. With my experience and credentials, I could easily command $35 to $40 an hour for private duty nursing, not the $18 Tyler and Vanessa assumed I'd have to accept. But more importantly, Patricia mentioned something that made me smile for the first time all day. You know, Evelyn, if you're really considering a career change, you should think about consulting. There's a growing market for experienced nurses who can help families navigate senior care options. With the right business plan, it could be quite lucrative. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my room, listening to Tyler and Vanessa's voices drifting up from the kitchen as they discussed their plans for redecorating the living room. They thought they had me trapped, dependent on their generosity, grateful for whatever crumbs of dignity they were willing to offer. They had 6 weeks mapped out where I would scramble to meet their demands, prove my worthiness to remain in their lives. What they didn't know was that I had resources they couldn't imagine and options they'd never considered. The first test was complete, and they had failed spectacularly. But this was just the beginning. Tomorrow, I would start making some calls of my own. 3 days after my conversation with Patricia, I woke up feeling genuinely unwell. Not the manufactured vulnerability that Aunt Cordelia had suggested I create, but real symptoms that made me grateful for the timing. My head pounded, my throat felt raw, and when I tried to get out of bed, a wave of dizziness sent me right back down onto the mattress. It was the perfect opportunity to test Tyler and Vanessa's compassion when I truly needed help rather than when they needed something from me. I reached for my phone and called Tyler's number, knowing he'd be getting ready for work. It rang 4 times before he answered, and I could hear the irritation in his voice before he even spoke. "Mom, what's wrong? I'm trying to get out the door." "I'm sorry to bother you," I said, my voice genuinely hoarse. "I think I might have caught something. I'm feeling pretty awful, and I was wondering if you could pick up some soup and maybe some throat lozenges when you get a chance today." There was a pause, and I could practically hear him calculating the inconvenience. "Are you sure it's not just allergies? The pollen count has been really high this week." "I don't think so, sweetheart. I've got a fever and chills. I haven't felt this bad in years." Another pause. "Well, I've got back-to-back meetings until 6 today, and then Vanessa and I have that dinner reservation at Meridian. Could you maybe order something online? I think there's grocery delivery available now." I closed my eyes, processing his response. His mother was sick, possibly with something serious given my age and symptoms, and his first suggestion was that I handle it myself through grocery delivery. I tried the delivery app, I lied, but they don't have the specific throat lozenges that work for me, and the earliest delivery slot isn't until tomorrow afternoon. "Oh," Tyler sounded genuinely stumped by this minor obstacle. Well, maybe Vanessa could swing by the pharmacy after her yoga class. Let me ask her." I heard him calling Vanessa's name, followed by muffled conversation. When he came back to the phone, his tone had shifted to that careful diplomacy he used when delivering bad news. "So Vanessa's got a really full day. She's got yoga, then a hair appointment, and she's meeting her sister for lunch. She said she could try to squeeze it in, but it would be really tight timing-wise." "I see," I said quietly. "Don't worry about it. I'll figure something out." "Are you sure? I mean, if it's a real emergency, we could probably rearrange some things." "A real emergency?" Apparently, unless I was bleeding or unconscious, my needs didn't qualify as urgent enough to disrupt their social calendar. No, I said. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden, Mom. It's just, you know how these things go. It's probably just a 24-hour bug. You'll be fine by tomorrow." After I hung up, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, marveling at how quickly Tyler had dismissed my illness and found reasons why helping me would be inconvenient. The old Evelyn would have dragged herself to the pharmacy, apologizing for even asking. But the new Evelyn, the one with $5.2 million in assets, decided to see exactly how far their indifference would go. An hour later, I called again. This time, Tyler didn't answer, so I tried Vanessa's number directly. "Hi, Evelyn," she said, and I could hear classical music in the background. "Tyler told me you're not feeling well. That's awful timing with everything you've got going on." Everything I had going on. As if my illness was poorly scheduled around my job search for their benefit. "I was hoping you might be able to stop by the pharmacy," I said, letting my voice sound weaker than it actually was. "I'm having trouble keeping anything down, and I'm getting pretty dehydrated." "Oh, that does sound terrible," Vanessa said with practiced sympathy. "The thing is, I'm at the salon right now getting highlights, and this process takes hours. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, actually. I'd been cutting my own hair for 2 years to save money. After this, I'm meeting Cassandra for lunch. We've had these reservations for weeks. And then I have a massage appointment that I absolutely cannot reschedule because this therapist is booked months in advance. A massage appointment that couldn't be rescheduled while her boyfriend's mother was sick and asking for basic help. "What about after your massage?" I asked. "Well, that goes until 4, and then I really need to get ready for dinner tonight. We're going to Meridian, and you know how long it takes me to get ready for someplace that nice." 3 hours to get ready for dinner while I was potentially dehydrating upstairs. Of course, I said, I understand. But here's an idea, Vanessa continued brightly as if she'd just solved world hunger. There's an urgent care clinic on Maple Street. They probably have everything you need right there, and they could check you out to make sure it's nothing serious. An urgent care clinic. She wanted me to drive myself while sick and dizzy to pay for medical care I didn't need, rather than asking her to make a 5-minute stop at CVS. That's a thought, I said carefully, although I'm not sure I should be driving right now. Oh, well, they probably have Uber or something like that. It might be expensive, but your health is worth it, right? My health was worth me paying for an Uber to urgent care, but not worth her stopping at a pharmacy. I'll think about it, I said. Feel better, Evelyn. And don't worry about dinner tonight. Tyler and I will just grab something quick afterward instead of cooking. As if either of them had prepared a meal in the past 6 months. After that call, I decided to escalate the test. I called Tyler's work number directly, knowing it would interrupt whatever meeting he was in. Evelyn? He sounded stressed and slightly annoyed. I'm in a presentation right now. Is everything okay? I'm sorry to interrupt, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but I think I need to go to the emergency room. I can't keep any fluids down, and I'm feeling really dizzy and confused. There was a long pause. I could hear voices in the background and imagined Tyler trying to process this information while his colleagues waited. Are you sure it's that serious? He asked finally. I mean, emergency rooms are so expensive, and they'll probably just tell you to rest and drink fluids. His mother was saying she felt confused and needed emergency care, and he was worried about the cost. I'm scared, Tyler, I said honestly. I haven't felt this awful since I had pneumonia 5 years ago. Okay, he said, and I could hear him moving, probably stepping out of his meeting. Look, can you give me like an hour to wrap up here? Then I can drive you to urgent care instead of the ER. It'll be cheaper and probably faster. An hour. While I was potentially having a medical emergency, he needed an hour to finish his work presentation. What if I get worse in the next hour? I asked. Then call 911, he said matter-of-factly. But honestly, Mom, you're probably just dehydrated. The paramedics would probably just tell you to drink some Gatorade. The casual dismissal was breathtaking. His 59-year-old mother was calling him scared and confused, and he was suggesting she diagnose herself and handle it independently while he finished his work. I'll try to wait, I said. Good, and hey, maybe take a cool shower? That always helps when I'm feeling overheated. A cool shower, for someone who'd just said she was dizzy and confused. 2 hours later, Tyler finally arrived home, looking harried and checking his watch constantly. Sorry, Mom. The meeting ran over and then I had to brief my team on next week's project. How are you feeling now? I was sitting in the living room in my robe, having actually recovered somewhat with rest and fluids, but still feeling weak enough that the test remained valid. A little better, I admitted, but still pretty shaky. Tyler sat down across from me but remained perched on the edge of the couch, clearly planning to make this quick. You look better than you sounded on the phone. Maybe it was just one of those quick bugs. Maybe, I said, although I was pretty scared for a while there. Yeah, well, you tend to worry about medical stuff more than most people, Tyler said dismissively. Remember when you thought you were having a heart attack last year, and it turned out to be acid reflux? I did remember. And I also remembered that he'd suggested I take antacids instead of going to the doctor, only to learn later that women often have atypical heart attack symptoms that should never be ignored. Anyway, Tyler continued, checking his watch again, Vanessa's going to be here soon to get ready for dinner. Do you think you'll be okay on your own tonight? We could pick up some soup on the way home if you want. Pick up soup on the way home at 10 p.m. after their 3-hour dinner at Meridian. I'll be fine, I said. Great. Tyler stood up, already mentally moving on to his evening plans. Just rest and drink fluids. You'll probably be completely fine by tomorrow. As he headed upstairs to shower and change for his dinner, I sat in the quiet living room and processed what had just happened. Over the course of 6 hours, I had presented Tyler and Vanessa with a genuine opportunity to show care and concern for someone they claimed to love. Instead, they had prioritized work meetings over my health, chosen social appointments over helping me, suggested I spend money on medical care instead of them spending 5 minutes at a pharmacy, dismissed my symptoms as anxiety or exaggeration, made it clear that my needs were an inconvenience to their lifestyle. The old Evelyn would have felt guilty for even asking for help. She would have apologized for being sick at an inconvenient time and praised them for eventually showing up. But the new Evelyn, the one who now understood her true worth, saw this experience for exactly what it was, a crystal clear demonstration of how little I mattered to them when I couldn't give them something in return. As I heard Tyler and Vanessa laughing upstairs while they got ready for their expensive dinner, I made a mental note to thank Aunt Cordelia for her wisdom. She had been absolutely right about letting people show their true character when they thought you were vulnerable. The test was complete, and the results were more revealing than I could have imagined. Tomorrow I would start making some very different kinds of plans. By Friday morning I had fully recovered from my illness, but the clarity it had provided about Tyler and Vanessa's priorities remained crystal clear. I was sipping my morning coffee in the kitchen when I heard Vanessa's voice drifting down from upstairs, talking animatedly on the phone. At first, I assumed she was chatting with one of her friends about weekend plans, but certain phrases caught my attention and made me pause. Exactly what I was telling you about, becoming more of a burden than a help. Tyler feels terrible about it, but I set my coffee cup down quietly and moved closer to the bottom of the stairs, my nursing instincts for gathering information kicking in automatically. I mean, she's only 59, but she acts so helpless sometimes. Like yesterday, with that supposed illness, Tyler had to leave work early, and honestly, she seemed fine when he got home. My blood ran cold. Vanessa was discussing my private medical situation with someone, dismissing my genuine illness as attention-seeking behavior. And the thing is, Chelsea, we're trying to start our lives together, and having his mother living here is it's not sustainable long-term. Tyler's finally starting to see that. Chelsea, that would be Vanessa's older sister, the one who worked in real estate and had opinions about everything. I'd met her twice, and both times she'd made pointed comments about how cozy my living arrangement with Tyler was. I climbed the stairs quietly, grateful for the thick carpeting that muffled my footsteps. Vanessa's door was slightly ajar, and her voice carried clearly into the hallway. So we've given her the whole rent ultimatum, which should solve itself naturally. I mean, there's no way she can come up with $800 a month on what she makes at that little community center job. The rent ultimatum that should solve itself naturally. They weren't hoping I'd find a way to pay rent. They were counting on my inability to afford it. Tyler's been researching some really nice senior communities in the area. Nothing too expensive, just places where she'd have her own space and wouldn't feel like she was imposing on us. Senior communities. For a 59-year-old woman who was in excellent health and fully independent. They were planning to warehouse me with people 20 years older because my presence inconvenienced their romantic ambitions. I know it sounds harsh, but Chelsea, you have to understand, she does everything for him. His laundry, his cooking, his cleaning. How is he supposed to learn to be an adult husband when his mommy is handling all the domestic stuff? This was perhaps the most revealing comment yet. Vanessa saw my care and support as preventing Tyler from becoming an adult husband, presumably one who would transfer all those domestic responsibilities to her. She wanted me gone not just for privacy, but because she didn't want to inherit the household management I'd been providing. Plus, there's the whole financial aspect. Tyler's been supporting her for 2 years now, and with the engagement ring I've been hinting about, we really need to start thinking about our own future. Supporting me, I almost laughed out loud at the audacity. I'd been paying for groceries, utilities, household supplies, and half the mortgage payments for 2 years, while providing free domestic labor, and Vanessa was framing this as Tyler supporting me. The plan is to gradually make things more uncomfortable until she realizes it's time to move on. We've already started with the rent thing. And next we're going to implement some house rules that'll make it clear this isn't really her home anymore. House rules. They were strategically planning to make my life miserable until I voluntarily left. Like, she won't be able to use the kitchen during peak hours when we're cooking. Well, when I'm cooking, since Tyler can barely boil water. And we're going to limit her TV time in the living room because we need space to entertain as a couple. Peak hours. TV time. They were treating me like a problematic tenant rather than Tyler's mother. Oh, and here's the best part. We're going to start charging her for utilities separately. Like, if she wants to run the air conditioning in her room or take long showers, that should come out of her portion, not ours. Separate utility billing for the woman who had been paying the utilities for 2 years. Tyler was hesitant at first, but I explained to him that enabling her dependency isn't healthy for anyone. She needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. Enabling her dependency. The woman who had raised him alone, worked 2 jobs to put him through college, and spent 2 years helping him establish his independence, was being accused of dependency. I actually found this great assisted living place called Sunset Gardens. It's only about 40 minutes away, so it's not like we'd never see her, but it would give everyone the space they need. 40 minutes away. Far enough that visits would require planning and commitment, making it easy to gradually reduce contact to holidays and special occasions. They have activities and meal plans and everything. Honestly, she'd probably be happier there with people her own age, instead of hanging around here feeling like a third wheel. People her own age. I was 59, not 89, but Vanessa was already categorizing me with people who needed assisted living. And the best part is, once we get her settled there, Tyler and I can really focus on our relationship. Maybe get engaged by Christmas, married next fall. We've been putting our lives on hold for his mother's comfort for too long, putting their lives on hold for my comfort, while I cooked their meals and cleaned their house and paid their bills. Tyler's worried about hurting her feelings, but I keep telling him that sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. She's never going to become independent, as long as we keep making it easy for her to depend on us. Cruel to be kind, by making my life so miserable that I'd beg to leave. And honestly, Chelsea, Tyler deserves to have a normal relationship without his mother hovering around all the time. When we have kids someday, do we really want them growing up thinking it's normal to have 3 generations under one roof? Future children who apparently shouldn't be exposed to the corrupting influence of their grandmother's presence. So the timeline is probably another month or 2 of gradually increasing pressure, and then maybe around Thanksgiving we'll have the big conversation about exploring other living options. By Christmas, she should be settled in her new place, and Tyler and I can finally start our real life together. A timeline. They had created an actual schedule for systematically destroying my comfort and security until I voluntarily exiled myself from my son's life. I heard Vanessa moving around the room, apparently getting ready to end the call. I have to run, but I'll keep you posted on how the plan progresses. Wish me luck. This is definitely going to be the year Tyler and I take control of our future. As I heard her saying goodbye to Chelsea, I quietly retreated to my room, my mind reeling from what I'd just learned. This wasn't about financial fairness or healthy boundaries or helping me become more independent. This was a carefully orchestrated campaign to drive me out of Tyler's life so that Vanessa could have complete control over him and their future. The rent demand, the house rules, the utility charges, the assisted living research. It was all part of a systematic plan to make my existence so uncomfortable that I'd voluntarily remove myself from their lives. What struck me most was Tyler's apparent cooperation with this scheme. The son I'd raised to be kind and thoughtful was actively participating in a plan to manipulate and emotionally abuse his own mother into exile. I sat on my bed and pulled out the briefcase I'd hidden in my closet, looking at the documents that proved I had more money than Tyler and Vanessa could spend in a lifetime. They were plotting to get rid of me because they saw me as a financial and emotional burden, never dreaming that the woman they were scheming against could buy their house as a weekend getaway without affecting her budget. But even more than the money, Aunt Cordelia had given me something invaluable, the knowledge that I deserved better than this. I deserved to be loved and respected, not managed and manipulated. I thought about calling Tyler immediately, confronting him about Vanessa's phone call, demanding an explanation for their cruel timeline and calculated cruelty. But then I remembered Aunt Cordelia's advice about letting people reveal their true character completely before making any major decisions. Vanessa had just handed me a roadmap of exactly what they were planning to do to me over the next few months. The question was, would I let them continue with their plan while I pretended to be the helpless victim they believed me to be, or would I start implementing some plans of my own? As I heard Vanessa's footsteps heading downstairs and her cheerful voice calling out, "Good morning, Evelyn," as if she hadn't just spent 20 minutes plotting my exile, I made my decision. Let them continue with their timeline. Let them implement their house rules and their utility charges and their systematic campaign of psychological warfare. Because while they were busy congratulating themselves on their clever manipulation tactics, I would be quietly planning something they could never anticipate. By Christmas, someone would indeed be starting a new life. But it wouldn't be the person Vanessa expected. The morning after overhearing Vanessa's phone call, I sat in my car outside a small office building in downtown Millfield, gathering courage for a conversation I never thought I'd need to have. The brass nameplate beside the entrance read, "Catherine Brennan, LCSW, Family Therapy and Elder Advocacy." I'd found Dr. Brennan through an online search for therapists who specialized in family manipulation and elder abuse, terms I never imagined would apply to my own life. Dr. Brennan's office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs that didn't feel clinical. She was a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and graying auburn hair, and something about her immediately put me at ease. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," I said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Of course. From our brief phone conversation yesterday, it sounds like you're dealing with some challenging family dynamics. Why don't you start by telling me what's been happening?" For the next hour, I laid out everything: Tyler's rent demand, Vanessa's manipulation tactics, my illness and their response, and finally, the overheard phone conversation detailing their systematic plan to drive me out. Dr. Brennan listened without judgment, occasionally taking notes, but mostly just giving me the space to speak truths I'd been afraid to acknowledge. "Evelyn," she said when I finished, "what you're describing is a textbook case of psychological manipulation designed to isolate you from your support system and make you question your own worth. In clinical terms, we call this a form of emotional abuse." Emotional abuse. Hearing a professional use those words to describe my situation was both validating and heartbreaking. The pattern you've described, making unreasonable demands, dismissing your legitimate needs, systematically removing your autonomy within your own living space, these are calculated tactics designed to make you feel like a burden until you remove yourself from their lives. "But they keep saying it's for my own good," I said, "that I need to become more independent." Dr. Brennan leaned forward slightly. "Evelyn, you've been completely independent your entire adult life. You raised a child alone, built a career, managed your own finances, and chose to help your son from a position of strength, not weakness. True independence means having choices, and what they're doing is systematically removing all your choices until you have only one option left: leaving." She pulled out a legal pad and pen. "I'd like to help you document what's been happening. Not necessarily for any legal action, but because having a clear record can help you see the patterns and make decisions based on facts rather than emotions." Over the next 30 minutes, we created a timeline of events, starting with my move into Tyler's house 2 years ago and progressing through recent escalations. Seeing it written out in black and white was illuminating. "Look at this pattern," Dr. Brennan said, pointing to our notes. "For 2 years, you had a stable, mutually beneficial living arrangement. Then Vanessa moves in 8 months ago, and suddenly you're a problem that needs to be solved. The timing isn't coincidental." She was right. Before Vanessa, Tyler had never complained about my presence, never suggested I was too dependent, never calculated the financial cost of my contributions versus my value. What should I do with this information? I asked. That depends on your goals. Do you want to try to repair the relationship with Tyler? Or are you more focused on protecting yourself from further emotional harm? It was a question I'd been avoiding, but sitting in that professional setting forced me to confront the truth. I don't think the relationship can be repaired as long as Vanessa is orchestrating this campaign against me. And Tyler, he's chosen to participate in hurting me rather than stand up for me. I'm not sure I can forgive that. Dr. Brennan nodded. That's a very mature assessment. In my experience, when someone shows you their true character under pressure, it's wise to believe them the first time. So what do I do now? You protect yourself. You document everything going forward. You build a support system outside of this toxic dynamic. And you remember that their treatment of you is a reflection of their character, not your worth. After leaving Dr. Brennan's office, I drove to the Millfield Public Library and spent 2 hours researching family manipulation tactics and psychological abuse. What I learned was both enlightening and infuriating. Tyler and Vanessa were following a playbook used by manipulators everywhere. Isolate the target, create financial pressure, systematically remove comfort and security, then present themselves as the reasonable ones offering solutions. My next stop was the law office of Sarah Martinez, an attorney specializing in elder law and family disputes. Mr. Rothwell had recommended her when I'd mentioned wanting to protect myself from potential future manipulation. Mrs. Morrison, Sarah said as I sat in her modern office overlooking Millfield's historic district, Mr. Rothwell briefed me on your inheritance situation. He also mentioned you were concerned about family members who might try to take advantage of your new financial position. Actually, it's more complicated than that, I said, and proceeded to explain the timeline Dr. Brennan and I had created that morning. Sarah listened with the focused attention of someone who'd heard similar stories before. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, making notes on her laptop. The good news is that you're taking proactive steps to protect yourself before the situation escalates further. The bad news is that what you're describing could potentially escalate to more serious forms of exploitation if they discover your inheritance before you're prepared. What kind of exploitation? Financial manipulation, primarily. Once they learn about your wealth, their approach will likely shift from trying to get rid of you to trying to control you and your money. They might suddenly become very concerned about your mental capacity, your ability to make sound financial decisions, your susceptibility to scams. The thought chilled me. What can I do to prevent that? Several things. First, we need to ensure your estate planning documents are ironclad and include specific protections against undue influence claims. Second, I recommend establishing a paper trail that demonstrates your mental competency and decision-making capacity. Third, we should consider setting up some legal structures that would make it difficult for anyone to challenge your financial autonomy. Over the next hour, Sarah outlined a comprehensive protection plan. We would document my mental and physical health through regular medical checkups. We would create detailed records of all my financial decisions and the reasoning behind them. We would establish a trust structure that would protect my assets even if someone successfully challenged my competency. Most importantly, Sarah said, we need to document the current manipulation campaign. If they later claim they were concerned about your welfare, we'll have evidence showing their true motivations were about removing you from their lives, not protecting you. I left Sarah's office with a thick folder of documents to review and a clear action plan for protecting myself legally and financially. But I wasn't done yet. My final stop of the day was the office of Marcus Webb, a private investigator recommended by Dr. Brennan. Marcus specialized in documenting family manipulation and gathering evidence for elder abuse cases. What you're looking for, Marcus explained after I'd outlined my situation, is documentation of their systematic campaign to psychologically pressure you. Phone records showing coordinated planning, evidence of their research into assisted living facilities, proof that they're intentionally making your living situation untenable. Is that legal? Absolutely. You have every right to document your own living situation and interactions with family members. We're not talking about illegal surveillance. We're talking about keeping records of conversations you're part of, documenting public behavior, and gathering evidence of their stated intentions. Marcus explained how I could legally record conversations in our state, how to document incidents of manipulation or dismissal, and how to preserve evidence of their planning without breaking any laws. The key, he said, is consistency. Document everything, no matter how small. Keep a daily journal of interactions. Save all text messages and emails. Record conversations when legally possible. Build an undeniable record of what's really happening. By the time I returned home that evening, Tyler and Vanessa were in the kitchen preparing dinner. Or rather, Vanessa was cooking while Tyler sat at the counter with his laptop, supposedly working, but actually playing some kind of mobile game. "Hey, Mom," Tyler said without looking up, "we saved you some leftovers from last night if you want to heat them up." Leftovers from last night. While they prepared a fresh meal for themselves, I was offered reheated scraps like a stray dog, hoping for table scraps. "That's very thoughtful," I said, pulling out my phone and opening the voice memo app Dr. Brennan had recommended. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk about the house rules you mentioned. I want to make sure I understand all the new expectations." Vanessa and Tyler exchanged a glance, and I saw Vanessa give him an almost imperceptible nod. "Oh, right," Tyler said, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Well, we thought it might be good to establish some clearer boundaries around shared spaces and utilities." Such as? For the next 20 minutes, they outlined their new rules. Restrictions on kitchen usage during prime cooking hours, limitations on living room access when they were entertaining, separate billing for utilities usage, and reduced storage space for my belongings. I listened patiently, asked clarifying questions, and documented every word on my phone. "This all sounds very organized," I said when they finished. "When do these new rules take effect?" "We were thinking next week," Vanessa said. "Give everyone time to adjust gradually." "Perfect," I said. "I appreciate you being so transparent about your expectations." As I headed upstairs with my reheated leftovers, I heard Vanessa whisper to Tyler, "See? I told you she'd be reasonable about it." Reasonable? Yes, I was being very reasonable. I was reasonably documenting every cruel word, reasonably building a legal defense against their manipulation, and reasonably preparing for the day when they would learn exactly who they'd been scheming against. The documentation phase was well underway, and thanks to the professionals I'd consulted, I was no longer just a victim of their psychological warfare. I was a strategist building an unassailable case for why I deserved better than their cruelty. Tomorrow, I would begin implementing some new strategies of my own. The invitation came exactly when my team of professionals had predicted it would. 3 weeks after Tyler and Vanessa had implemented their new house rules, which had made my daily life a carefully choreographed dance around their schedules and preferences, Tyler knocked on my bedroom door with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a child trying to apologize for breaking something valuable. "Mom, do you have a minute to talk?" I looked up from the book I was reading, though I'd actually been reviewing notes from my latest session with Dr. Brennan about manipulation tactics that typically preceded major confrontations. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." Tyler entered my room hesitantly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Another childhood tell that meant he was nervous about something. He sat in my reading chair, the same spot where we'd had our initial conversation about rent 3 weeks ago, though he seemed like a different person now. Older, more tired, and somehow smaller. "I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving," he began, avoiding direct eye contact. "Vanessa and I have been discussing it, and we thought it might be nice to have a real family dinner this year. Just the 3 of us, like old times." Like old times. The phrase would have been touching if I hadn't spent the past 3 weeks living under their increasingly restrictive house rules, eating reheated leftovers while they enjoyed fresh meals, and tiptoeing around my own living space like an unwelcome guest. "That sounds lovely," I said carefully. "What did you have in mind?" Tyler's face brightened, apparently encouraged by my positive response. "Well, Vanessa's been taking those cooking classes at the Culinary Institute, and she's really excited to try out some new recipes. She wants to make the whole traditional spread: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, the works. Vanessa wanted to cook Thanksgiving dinner. The same woman who had spent the past 8 months letting me handle all the meal preparation while she focused on her various hobbies and social commitments. How wonderful, I said. I'd be happy to help her with the preparation. Some of those traditional dishes can be tricky the first time. Oh no, Tyler said quickly. She really wants to do it herself. You know how she is about wanting to prove she can handle things independently. Independently. While living in a house I'd helped pay for, sleeping in furniture I'd helped buy, and benefiting from 2 years of domestic support I'd provided for free. But we definitely want you there for the actual dinner, Tyler continued. It's important to both of us that we have a real family gathering. Vanessa specifically mentioned how much she's looking forward to it. I wondered what Vanessa had actually said about Thanksgiving dinner, given what I'd overheard about their timeline for having the big conversation around the holidays. In my documented conversations with Dr. Brennan, we discussed how manipulators often created special occasions specifically to maximize emotional impact during confrontations. When are you planning to have dinner? I asked. Thursday afternoon, around 4. That'll give us time to prepare everything properly and really enjoy the day together. 4 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day, a time when most businesses would be closed, when friends and extended family would be busy with their own celebrations, when I would be isolated with just Tyler and Vanessa for whatever conversation they had planned. I'm looking forward to it, I said honestly, because I was looking forward to it, though probably not for the reasons Tyler imagined. Tyler stood up from the chair, looking relieved that the conversation had gone well. Great. Oh, and Mom? Vanessa wanted me to mention that she's planning this as a kind of, well, a fresh start for all of us. She feels like maybe we haven't been communicating as well as we could have been, and she wants Thanksgiving to be an opportunity to clear the air and talk about how we can all be happier going forward. Clear the air, talk about how we can all be happier going forward. The euphemisms were almost poetic in their transparency. That sounds very mature of her, I said. I appreciate that she wants to improve our family dynamic. Tyler beamed at my response. I knew you'd understand. Vanessa was worried you might be resistant to having an honest conversation about where we all go from here. But I told her you've always been reasonable about these things. Reasonable. There was that word again, the one they used when they wanted me to accept their decisions without resistance. I'm always open to honest conversations, I said, especially when they're focused on everyone's happiness and well-being. After Tyler left my room, I immediately called Dr. Brennan to schedule an emergency session. 2 hours later, I was sitting in her office, sharing the details of Tyler's invitation and my growing certainty about what Thanksgiving dinner would really entail. You're absolutely right to be suspicious, Dr. Brennan said after I'd recounted the conversation. Creating a special occasion for a major confrontation is a classic manipulation tactic. It makes the target feel guilty about quote, 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 if they resist the agenda. So what should I do? Decline the invitation? That depends on your goals. Are you ready for the confrontation they're planning? Do you have your support systems in place? Are you prepared emotionally and practically for whatever they might propose? I thought about the documentation I'd been gathering, the legal protections Sarah Martinez had helped me establish, the financial independence I possessed that Tyler and Vanessa couldn't imagine. For the first time in months, I felt truly prepared for whatever they might throw at me. I think I am ready, I said. And honestly, I'm curious to see exactly how they plan to handle this conversation. Dr. Brennan made some notes on her laptop. If you do decide to attend, I recommend going in with clear boundaries about what you will and won't accept. Don't let them control the narrative or make you feel like you're the problem that needs to be solved. What if they present this as caring about my welfare? That they've found me a wonderful place to live where I'll be happier? Then you ask them specific questions about why they believe you're unhappy in your current situation. You ask them to provide concrete examples of how your presence is harming their relationship or your own well-being. You make them spell out exactly what they're proposing and why. Over the next week, I prepared for Thanksgiving dinner with the same strategic planning I'd once used for major nursing procedures. I reviewed all my documentation, rehearsed responses to likely scenarios, and ensured all my legal and financial protections were firmly in place. I also did something I'd never done before. I started planning my own agenda for the conversation. The night before Thanksgiving, Vanessa knocked on my door while Tyler was at the store, picking up last-minute ingredients for her ambitious menu. "Evelyn, can I come in for a minute?" She entered my room carrying 2 glasses of wine, extending one to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I just wanted to have a quick chat before tomorrow," she said, settling into my reading chair. "I hope you know how much tomorrow means to Tyler and me." I accepted the wine but didn't drink it, waiting to see where this conversation would lead. "I know things have been a little tense between us lately," Vanessa continued. "The house rules and the rent situation and everything. I hope you understand that none of it comes from a place of not caring about you." "Of course," I said neutrally. "It's just that Tyler and I are at such an important stage in our relationship, and we're trying to build something really special together. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about what's best for everyone involved." Difficult decisions about what's best for everyone. The setup was so predictable I almost smiled. "Tyler loves you so much," Vanessa went on, "but he also needs to focus on his future, on our future together. And I think deep down, you probably want that for him too, right? You want him to be happy and successful and free to build the life he deserves?" Free to build the life he deserves, without his mother's inconvenient presence, presumably. "I want Tyler to be happy," I said truthfully. "I've always wanted that." "I knew you'd understand," Vanessa said, visibly relaxing. "That's what I keep telling Tyler. Your mother raised you to be selfless and caring. She'll want what's best for you, even if it's hard." Even if it's hard. Translation: even if it means sacrificing my own comfort and security for their convenience. "Well," I said, raising my wine glass slightly, "here's to family conversations that lead to everyone getting what they deserve." Vanessa clinked her glass against mine, completely missing the double meaning in my toast. "Exactly," she said, "to everyone getting what they deserve." As she left my room, I sat back in my chair and smiled for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinner was going to be very educational indeed. For all of us. But especially for Tyler and Vanessa, who had no idea they were about to discover what it really meant to get exactly what they deserved. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the crisp clarity of late November, and I woke up feeling more prepared for a confrontation than I had in my entire life. I dressed carefully in a navy blue dress that projected both dignity and strength, pinned my hair back in a style that conveyed competence, and made sure the small recording device Dr. Brennan had recommended was securely positioned in my blazer pocket. The house smelled like turkey and herbs when I came downstairs, and I had to admit that Vanessa had clearly put considerable effort into the meal preparation. The dining room table was set with the good china, the set I'd given Tyler as a housewarming gift when he bought the house, and everything looked picture perfect. "Mom," Tyler called from the kitchen as he heard my footsteps. Perfect timing. Vanessa's just putting the finishing touches on everything. I found them both in the kitchen, Tyler carving the turkey with the precision of someone following YouTube instructions, while Vanessa arranged side dishes in serving bowls with the focused intensity of a catering professional. "Evelyn, you look lovely," Vanessa said, though her smile seemed more nervous than usual. "I hope you're hungry. I may have gone a little overboard with the menu." "Everything smells wonderful," I said honestly. "You've clearly put a lot of work into this." Well, I wanted it to be special, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Family dinners should be memorable, don't you think? Memorable. Yes, I had a feeling this particular dinner would be unforgettable for all of us. For the first hour, the conversation remained safely superficial. Tyler talked about his latest project at work, Vanessa shared stories about her cooking class adventures, and I contributed appropriately enthusiastic responses while mentally noting how different their behavior was from the past few weeks. Gone were the casual dismissals, the restrictions on my kitchen access, the pointed comments about my living arrangements. Instead, they were treating me with exaggerated warmth and attention, like actors overplaying their roles. "This turkey is absolutely perfect," I said as we worked our way through the main course. "You should be proud of yourself, Vanessa." She beamed at the compliment, but I caught her exchanging a meaningful look with Tyler that suggested they were building towards something. "Actually," Tyler said, setting down his fork and adopting a more serious tone, "we wanted to use this opportunity to talk about something important with you, Mom." Here it was, the moment they'd been orchestrating for weeks. "Of course," I said, reaching for my water glass to buy a moment while I activated the recording device in my pocket. "What's on your mind?" Vanessa leaned forward slightly, her expression carefully crafted to convey concern and compassion. "Evelyn, we've been doing a lot of thinking about your living situation and your future, and we're worried that the current arrangement isn't really serving anyone's best interests." "How so?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral and interested. Tyler took the lead, clearly having rehearsed this part of the conversation. "Well, you've been so generous helping us get established here, but we think it's time for you to focus on building your own independent life. You're only 59, Mom. You have so many opportunities ahead of you." "What kind of opportunities are you thinking about?" I asked. "That's exactly what we wanted to discuss," Vanessa said enthusiastically, pulling out a folder that had been sitting on the kitchen counter. "We've been doing some research, and we found some amazing options for you." She opened the folder to reveal brochures for senior living communities, apartment complexes, and what appeared to be assisted living facilities. The same materials I'd seen her gathering over the past few weeks, now presented as thoughtful research done for my benefit. "This place is particularly wonderful," Vanessa continued, pointing to a glossy brochure for Sunset Gardens. "It's a full-service community with activities, meal plans, transportation services, and healthcare support. You'd have your own apartment, but with all the convenience and social opportunities you could want." I picked up the brochure, noting that Sunset Gardens was indeed exactly 40 minutes away, just as I had heard Vanessa tell her sister during that overheard phone call. "It looks very nice," I said. "What made you think of this particular place?" "Well," Tyler said, "we know that living here has been somewhat limiting for you. You don't really have peers your own age to socialize with, and we're probably not the most exciting roommates for someone at your stage of life." Roommates. He was now categorizing our relationship as a roommate situation rather than a mother living with her son. "Plus," Vanessa added, "we've been thinking about our own future and some of the changes we'd like to make to the house. We're hoping to start a family soon, and we'd need to convert your room into a nursery." A nursery. They were planning to erase my presence from the house so completely that my room would become their future child's bedroom. "I see," I said carefully. "And what's the timeline for these changes?" Tyler and Vanessa exchanged another look, and I could see them moving into the next phase of their prepared presentation. "That's the thing," Tyler said. "We know this might seem sudden, but there's actually an opening at Sunset Gardens right now. These places usually have waiting lists, but they had a cancellation, and the apartment is available starting December 1st. December 1st. Less than a week away. They weren't just suggesting I move. They were telling me I needed to be gone within days." "The timing is really perfect," Vanessa said, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. "You could be settled in before Christmas, and it would give Tyler and me a chance to start fresh in the new year." "What about the financial aspect?" I asked. "I assume a place like this is quite expensive." Tyler cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, that's something we've been thinking about too. The monthly fee is $3,200, which includes everything: housing, meals, activities, healthcare support. $3,200 a month. More than 4 times what they'd been demanding in rent, for a place that would essentially warehouse me with people 20 years older than me. "And you think I can afford that on my current income?" I asked. "We've actually looked into that," Vanessa said, pulling out more papers from her folder. "There are some really good programs for people in your situation. Social Services has housing assistance for seniors, and there are grants available for women your age who are transitioning to independent living." Social Services. Housing assistance. They wanted me to apply for welfare programs so I could afford to be exiled from their lives. "But here's the really exciting part," Tyler said, warming to his subject. "We've decided we want to help with the transition costs. We're prepared to cover your first 3 months at Sunset Gardens. That's almost $10,000 to help you get settled." $10,000. They were offering to pay almost $10,000 to get rid of me. Money they apparently had available, despite claiming they needed me to pay rent to help with their finances. "That's very generous," I said. "Where would this money come from?" "We've been saving up," Vanessa said quickly. "Tyler got a bonus at work, and I've been setting aside money from my freelance design projects." Freelance design projects. This was the first I'd heard of Vanessa having any income at all, let alone enough to contribute thousands of dollars to my exile fund. "And of course," Tyler continued, "once you're settled there, you wouldn't have to worry about any of the stress of maintaining a household or dealing with bills or any of that stuff. It would be like a permanent vacation." A permanent vacation. In an assisted living facility 40 minutes away where they could visit me occasionally out of obligation rather than love. "There's just one small thing," Vanessa said, her tone becoming slightly more serious. "Because the opening is available now, we'd need to move pretty quickly on the decision. They need a commitment by Friday." Friday? Today was Thursday. They were giving me less than 24 hours to agree to leave my home and move into institutional care. "And if I'm not ready to make that decision by Friday?" I asked. Tyler's expression became uncomfortable, but Vanessa maintained her bright smile. "Well, we really hope you will be, because we think this is such a wonderful opportunity for you. But if you need more time to think about it, we'd have to explore other options." Other options? The threat was implicit but clear. Agree to their timeline, or they'd make my life even more difficult. "What kind of other options?" I pressed. Tyler shifted in his seat, clearly not wanting to be the one to articulate the threat. "Well, Mom, we've been thinking that the current living arrangement just isn't sustainable anymore. With or without Sunset Gardens, we need to make some changes." "Changes such as?" Vanessa stepped in, apparently more comfortable with direct confrontation than Tyler was. "Such as establishing a more formal landlord-tenant relationship, with market-rate rent and clear boundaries about shared spaces and household responsibilities." Market-rate rent, in the house I'd been co-subsidizing for 2 years. "Which would be how much?" I asked. "Probably around $1,500 a month," Tyler said quietly, "plus utilities and a security deposit." $1,500 a month plus utilities for a single room in a house where I'd been contributing financially and domestically for 2 years, nearly double what they'd originally demanded. "Of course," Vanessa added quickly, "we think Sunset Gardens is a much better option for everyone. You'd have so much more freedom and independence there." Freedom and independence in institutional care versus financial extortion if I chose to stay. They'd constructed their ultimatum carefully, making exile seem like the generous option compared to the alternative of bankruptcy. I sat back in my chair, looking at these two people who had spent weeks planning this conversation, calculating exactly how to manipulate me into accepting their solution to the problem of my existence. "This is quite a lot to process," I said finally. "We know it is," Tyler said, reaching across the table to pat my hand with false sympathy. "But Mom, we really think this is what's best for you. You deserve to be happy and independent, not worrying about our household or feeling like you have to take care of us all the time." "I deserve to be happy and independent," by accepting exile to an assisted living facility so they could erase me from their lives. Can I ask you something? I said, looking directly at Tyler. Do you remember what you promised me when you were 8 years old and I gave you that gaming console I worked 3 months of overtime to afford? Tyler's face flushed slightly. Mom, that was a long time ago. You promised to take care of me when you grew up. So I'm wondering, is this what taking care of me looks like to you? The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler couldn't meet my eyes, and Vanessa's bright smile finally faltered. Sometimes taking care of someone means helping them become independent, Vanessa said softly. And sometimes, I replied, it means recognizing that the people you're trying to get rid of might surprise you. I stood up from the table, looking down at the folder full of brochures and financial projections they'd prepared to support their campaign to dispose of me. I think I'm ready for dessert now, I said, but first, there's something I need to show you both. I walked to my purse in the living room, feeling Tyler and Vanessa's eyes following my every movement. They were probably wondering if I was going upstairs to cry, or perhaps to call someone for emotional support. What they didn't expect was for me to return with a thick manila folder and a calm, almost serene expression. Before we talk about dessert, I said, settling back into my chair at the dining table, I think it's time we had a completely honest conversation about my future. And yours. Tyler looked confused, but Vanessa's expression had shifted to something more guarded, as if she sensed that the script they'd so carefully prepared was about to be thrown out the window. I opened the manila folder and pulled out the first document, a copy of the inheritance letter from Rothwell, Hartman and Associates. I placed it on the table between us, watching their faces as they tried to process what they were seeing. What is this? Tyler asked, leaning forward to read the letterhead. It's a letter from a law firm, I said calmly. Specifically, the law firm that handled my great-aunt Cordelia's estate. Vanessa picked up the letter, her eyes scanning the formal language before landing on the dollar amounts listed in the summary. I watched the color drain from her face as she read the numbers. This says, she started, then stopped, reading again to make sure she wasn't mistaken. This says you inherited over $5 million. $5.2 million to be exact, I confirmed. Plus real estate holdings, art collections, and various other assets. Aunt Cordelia was quite successful with her investments over the years. Tyler snatched the letter from Vanessa's hands, his eyes darting across the page as if he could make the numbers change by staring at them harder. When did this happen? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I received the initial notification 3 weeks ago, I said, the same day you informed me I needed to pay rent or find somewhere else to live. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Tyler and Vanessa sat frozen, the full implications of what I'd just revealed slowly sinking in. 3 weeks ago, Vanessa repeated slowly. You've known about this for 3 weeks, and you didn't tell us? I didn't tell anyone, I said. On the advice of my aunt's letter, I decided to take some time to see how people would treat me when they thought I had nothing to offer them. I pulled out the next document, Drive Brennan's psychological evaluation and timeline of manipulation tactics. This is a professional assessment of our family dynamic over the past month, I continued. Dr. Catherine Brennan is a licensed clinical social worker who specializes in family manipulation and elder abuse. According to her analysis, what you've been doing to me constitutes a textbook case of psychological manipulation, designed to isolate me and make me question my own worth. Tyler's hands were shaking as he stared at the psychological evaluation. Mom, that's not. We weren't trying to. Weren't trying to what? I asked gently. Weren't trying to charge me rent for a house I've been co-subsidizing for 2 years? Weren't trying to restrict my access to the kitchen I've been maintaining? Weren't trying to exile me to an assisted living facility so you could convert my room into a nursery? I pulled out another document, the recording transcript that Marcus Webb had helped me prepare, showing selected quotes from conversations over the past weeks. This is a transcript of some of our recent conversations, I said, watching Vanessa's eyes widen as she recognized her own words. Including your phone call with your sister Chelsea, where you discussed your timeline for getting rid of me and your strategy for making my life here so uncomfortable that I'd voluntarily leave. Vanessa's face went from pale to bright red. You were listening to my private conversations? I was listening to conversations about my own life and future that were taking place in my living space, I corrected. Conversations where you referred to me as a burden, calculated the cost of my exile, and planned systematic psychological pressure to force me out. I placed the final document on the table, Sarah Martinez's legal analysis of their manipulation campaign and the protections I'd put in place. And this is a legal assessment from my attorney, Sarah Martinez, who specializes in elder law and family exploitation. She's documented everything you've done and helped me establish protections against any future attempts to manipulate or control me. Tyler finally found his voice, though it came out cracked and desperate. Mom, you have to understand, we didn't know about the inheritance. If we had known... If you had known what? I asked. You would have treated me with respect. You would have valued my contributions to this household. You would have seen me as a person worthy of love rather than a problem to be solved? That's not fair, Vanessa said, her voice sharp with panic. We were trying to help you become independent. We thought we were doing what was best for you. I laughed, and the sound surprised even me. Not bitter or angry, but genuinely amused by the absurdity of her statement. Vanessa, you researched assisted living facilities behind my back. You calculated the exact cost of getting rid of me. You created a timeline for psychological pressure designed to break my spirit. And when that didn't work fast enough, you offered to pay $10,000 to expedite my removal from your lives. Exactly which part of that was for my benefit? Tyler buried his face in his hands. God, Mom, when you put it like that... I'm putting it exactly like it was, I said firmly. I'm stating facts. Facts that are documented, recorded, and legally protected. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out the small recording device, placing it on the table next to the other documents. Including this conversation, I added, where you presented me with an ultimatum: accept exile to an institution or face financial extortion to remain in the house I've been supporting. Vanessa stared at the recording device as if it were a snake that might bite her. You recorded us? Tonight? I recorded a conversation about my own living situation and future, I said. A conversation where you threatened to charge me $1,500 a month, plus utilities for a single room, while simultaneously offering to pay $10,000 to make me disappear. Tyler looked up from his hands, his eyes red with what might have been tears or just shock. What do you want from us, Mom? What can we do to fix this? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized this was the moment I'd been building toward for weeks. Not just the revelation of my inheritance, but the revelation of who these people really were when they thought they held all the power. Tyler, I said softly, 3 hours ago you told me I deserved to be happy and independent. You were right about that. I do deserve to be happy. I deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. I deserve to have my contributions valued, rather than dismissed. I gathered the documents back into the manila folder, my movements deliberate and calm. But what I don't deserve is to be manipulated, threatened, and psychologically abused by people who claim to love me. What I don't deserve is to have my room converted into a nursery while I'm still living in it. What I don't deserve is to be charged market rate rent for the privilege of continuing to be your unpaid domestic staff. Vanessa's voice was barely audible when she spoke. So what happens now? I stood up from the table, looking down at these two people who had spent weeks planning my destruction, never imagining that their victim might have resources they couldn't dream of. Now, I said, I'm going to show you what independence really looks like. And you're going to learn what it means to take care of yourselves without expecting someone else to sacrifice their dignity for your comfort. I paused at the doorway, turning back to look at them one final time. Oh, and Tyler? That $10,000 you offered to pay for my first 3 months at Sunset Gardens? I spend more than that on groceries in a month now. But thank you for putting a price tag on how much my absence from your life is worth to you. It's been very educational." As I walked toward the stairs, I heard Tyler call after me, his voice desperate and broken. "Mom, please, we can talk about this. We can work something out." I stopped on the bottom step, my hand on the banister. "You're absolutely right," I said without turning around. "We definitely need to work something out. But it's going to be on my terms now. And Tyler, you might want to start learning how to do your own laundry." The rest of the evening was going to be very interesting indeed. I spent the rest of Thanksgiving evening in my room, listening to the muffled sounds of Tyler and Vanessa's increasingly frantic conversations drifting up from downstairs. Occasionally I heard one of them crying, Tyler's voice breaking as he spoke in hushed, desperate tones, and Vanessa's higher-pitched responses that alternated between anger and panic. They were clearly trying to figure out how to salvage a situation that had gone so catastrophically wrong. Around 10 o'clock, Tyler knocked on my door again, his voice small and tentative through the wood. "Mom, can we please talk? I know I messed up. We messed up. But maybe we can figure out how to fix this." I opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, his hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed, looking more like the scared little boy I remembered than the calculating adult who had presented me with an ultimatum just hours earlier. "What exactly do you want to fix, Tyler?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but not unkind. "Everything," he said desperately. "The way we've been treating you, the things we said, the whole plan with Sunset Gardens. Mom, I know how it looked, but we really thought we were helping you become more independent." I leaned against the doorframe, studying his face. "Tyler, do you honestly believe that? Do you really think that threatening to charge me $1,500 a month was about helping me become independent?" His face crumpled, and for a moment I saw a flash of the honest young man I'd raised. "No," he whispered. "No, I don't believe that." I was lying to myself because it was easier than admitting what we were really doing. It was the first completely honest thing he'd said to me in months. "What were you really doing?" I asked gently. Tyler slumped against the wall as if the weight of his actions was finally too heavy to carry. "We were trying to get rid of you so we could have the life we wanted without having to consider anyone else's feelings or needs. And now? Now I realize that the life I thought I wanted isn't worth having if it means treating you like that." He looked up at me with something that looked like genuine remorse. "Mom, I know I broke my promise to you. I know I failed as your son. But please, can you give me a chance to try to be better?" I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a recognition that this conversation was different from all the others. Tyler wasn't trying to manipulate me or justify his actions. He was simply acknowledging the truth of what he'd done. "What about Vanessa?" I asked. Tyler's expression darkened. Vanessa is having a harder time accepting that we were wrong. She keeps saying we just handled things poorly, but that the basic idea was still right." "Which basic idea?" "That you needed to move out so we could start our lives together." He shook his head. "But I'm starting to realize that anyone who makes me choose between them and my family, maybe that's not someone I should be building a life with." It was a profound moment of clarity, one that had taken a $5 million revelation to achieve, but clarity nonetheless. "Tyler," I said, "I need you to understand something. This isn't about the money. Even if I had been the struggling widow you thought I was, your behavior would have been unacceptable. The way you treated me, the dismissiveness, the manipulation, the systematic campaign to make me feel unwelcome in what was supposed to be my home, that was wrong regardless of my financial situation." "I know," he said quietly. "I know that now." "Do you? Because I'm not sure you really understand the depth of what you put me through." I spent weeks wondering if I was being too sensitive, if maybe I really was a burden, if perhaps you'd be better off without me. "You made me question my own worth, Tyler. Your own mother." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," I said firmly. Sorry is just the beginning. Over the next hour, we had the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Tyler acknowledged the full extent of his behavior, admitted that Vanessa had been the driving force behind most of the cruel tactics, but took responsibility for going along with them instead of protecting me. He talked about how he'd gotten caught up in Vanessa's vision of their future and had somehow convinced himself that I was an obstacle to their happiness rather than a source of support. The thing is, he said as our conversation wound down, I think I knew what we were doing was wrong, but Vanessa made it seem so reasonable, so logical. She had an answer for everything, a justification for every cruel thing we did. Tyler, Vanessa didn't make you do anything. She may have suggested and planned, but you chose to participate. You chose to value her approval over my well-being. You're right, he said, and I have to live with that choice. The next morning, I woke to the sound of raised voices from downstairs. By the time I dressed and made my way to the kitchen, I found Tyler and Vanessa in the middle of what appeared to be a major argument. She's manipulating you, Vanessa was saying, her voice high and strained. Can't you see that? She let us make fools of ourselves when she could have just told us about the inheritance from the beginning. She let us show our true character, Tyler replied, his voice calmer than I'd heard it in months. And now we have to live with what that says about us. What it says about us is that we were trying to help someone we thought was struggling. If she had been honest from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Tyler saw me in the doorway and his expression grew pained. Vanessa, she's right here. Vanessa spun around to face me, her perfectly styled hair slightly mussed, her makeup smeared from what appeared to have been a sleepless night. Evelyn, you have to admit that this whole situation could have been avoided if you'd just been honest about your financial situation. I poured myself a cup of coffee before responding, taking my time to consider her words. Vanessa, I said finally, you're suggesting that I should have revealed private financial information to prevent you from showing me who you really are when you thought I was vulnerable. But I needed to see exactly that. I needed to know how you would treat someone you believed had no power to resist your demands. That's not fair, she said. You set us up. I gave you every opportunity to show kindness, compassion, and respect to someone you claimed to care about. You chose manipulation, cruelty, and psychological pressure instead. I didn't set you up. I simply didn't prevent you from revealing your true character. Tyler stepped closer to me. Mom, what can I do to make this right? I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to earn your forgiveness. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, and saw someone who was genuinely grappling with the consequences of his choices. Tyler, forgiveness isn't something you can earn through grand gestures or apologies. It's something that develops over time, through consistent actions that demonstrate real change. Then what should I do? You should start by making a choice about what kind of man you want to be. Do you want to be someone who stands up for people who can't stand up for themselves? Or someone who goes along with cruelty because it's convenient? Tyler looked at Vanessa, then back at me. I want to be better than I've been. Then you need to decide whether you're going to continue in a relationship with someone who sees vulnerable people as problems to be solved, or whether you're going to find someone who shares your values about how families should treat each other. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Vanessa stared at Tyler, clearly realizing that her campaign to remove me from his life had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Tyler, she said carefully, you're not seriously considering ending our relationship over this. I'm considering what kind of person I want to spend my life with, Tyler replied, and whether that person should be someone who would manipulate and psychologically abuse my mother. Vanessa's composure finally cracked completely. Fine, she said, her voice shaking with rage. Fine, choose your mother over your future. See how that works out for you. She stormed out of the kitchen, and within an hour she was gone, taking her belongings, her designer handbags, and her plans for converting my room into a nursery. As Tyler and I watched her car disappear down the street, he turned to me with an expression I recognized from his childhood, part relief, part uncertainty about what came next. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know I don't deserve it, but would you be willing to stay, to give me a chance to prove I can be the son you raised me to be?" I looked around the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, the living room where I'd spent countless evenings, the home where I'd tried to build a peaceful life after losing my husband. "Tyler," I said, "I think it's time for both of us to start fresh. But not here, and not with me continuing to subsidize your life while you figure out how to be an adult." His face fell, but he nodded. "I understand." "Good, because tomorrow I'm going house hunting. And you're going to learn how to take care of yourself, really take care of yourself, for the first time in your adult life." For the first time in months, Tyler smiled, a real smile, not the artificial brightness he'd been wearing during his manipulation campaign. "Will you let me help?" he asked. "With finding your new house, not because I want to control where you live, but because I'd like to be part of helping you build the life you deserve?" I considered his request carefully. "We'll see, Tyler. We'll see if your actions match your words." As we stood in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of their failed Thanksgiving dinner, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete freedom to choose my own path, surrounded by people who valued me, living life entirely on my own terms. The liberation was complete, and it felt like coming home to myself. 8 months later, I stood on the wraparound porch of my new home in Riverside Heights, watching the morning sun dance across the lake that stretched out beyond my perfectly manicured garden. The house was everything I'd dreamed of, but never dared to buy. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen with granite countertops, and a library with built-in shelves that reached the ceiling. But more than the luxury, it represented something I'd never had before. A space that was entirely mine, chosen by me, paid for by me, and designed around my happiness rather than someone else's convenience. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. After leaving Tyler's house that December morning, I'd spent 3 months in a beautiful extended-stay hotel while working with a real estate agent to find the perfect property. During that time, I'd also been working with Dr. Brennan to process the emotional trauma of Tyler and Vanessa's manipulation campaign, and with Sarah Martinez to establish a comprehensive financial plan that would protect my inheritance while allowing me to live the life I'd always deserved. I'd also been rebuilding my relationship with Tyler, one careful conversation at a time. True to his word, Tyler had spent the past 8 months learning to be genuinely independent. After Vanessa left, he'd struggled initially, calling me in panic when his washing machine broke, asking for advice about grocery shopping, even admitting he didn't know how to make a proper doctor's appointment. But instead of stepping in to rescue him, I gently guided him toward figuring these things out himself. "Mom," he'd said during one of our weekly phone calls, "I'm starting to realize I never actually learned how to be an adult. I just learned how to find people who would take care of me." It was a profound moment of self-awareness that marked real progress in his growth. Tyler had also started therapy with Dr. Brennan, working through his patterns of manipulation and dependency. He'd gotten a promotion at work, partly because he was no longer distracted by relationship drama, and had even started volunteering at a senior center, helping elderly residents with technology issues. I wanted to understand what it felt like to actually serve people without expecting anything in return, he'd explained when he told me about the volunteer work. The change in him was remarkable. The entitled, manipulative man who had tried to exile me to assisted living had gradually been replaced by someone who was thoughtful, self-reliant, and genuinely committed to making amends for his behavior. This morning, Tyler was coming for his first visit to my new house. We'd been rebuilding our relationship slowly, meeting for lunch every few weeks, having phone conversations where he actually listened to my thoughts and feelings instead of trying to manage me. But this would be the first time he'd seen the life I'd built for myself with Aunt Cordelia's gift. At exactly 11 o'clock, I heard his car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched him get out, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. Not expensive roses or an elaborate arrangement, but simple daisies that he remembered were my favorites. It was the kind of thoughtful gesture that showed he was finally paying attention to who I actually was, rather than who he needed me to be. "Mom," he said when I opened the door, his eyes widening as he took in the spacious foyer with its polished hardwood floors and crystal chandelier. "This place is incredible." "Thank you," I said, accepting the daisies with genuine pleasure. "Would you like a tour?" For the next hour, I showed Tyler through every room, watching his expression as he absorbed the reality of what my life looked like now. The kitchen where I cooked elaborate meals for myself and friends without worrying about anyone's restrictions. The library where I'd been reading voraciously, making up for years of having too little time for books. The guest rooms that I'd decorated for the friends who now visited regularly, staying for long weekends of conversation and laughter. "The sunroom is my favorite," I said, leading him to the bright, plant-filled space where I'd been learning to paint watercolors and practicing the piano I'd always wanted to play. Tyler stood quietly for a moment, taking in the easel with my latest painting, a landscape of the lake view, and the baby grand piano where sheet music was scattered across the bench. "You seem really happy," he said finally. "I am happy," I replied, genuinely, deeply happy in a way I didn't even know was possible. "I'm glad," he said, and I could hear that he truly meant it. "I'm also ashamed that it took you leaving for me to realize how much damage I was doing to your happiness." We settled onto the comfortable couch in the sunroom, where afternoon light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Tyler had brought photo albums, pictures of his childhood that I hadn't seen in years, memories of the life we'd shared before everything went wrong. "I've been thinking a lot about this picture," he said, pointing to a photo of us at his college graduation. "Look at how proud you are, and look at how I'm not even really acknowledging you in the picture. I was already starting to take you for granted even then." It was true. In the photo, I was beaming with pride while Tyler looked past the camera, already focused on his next achievement rather than recognizing the woman who'd made it all possible. "I think that's when I started seeing you as a given rather than a gift," he continued. "Like you'd always be there, always be willing to sacrifice for me, so I didn't need to cherish or protect what we had." "And now?" I asked. "Now I understand that relationships, even family relationships, have to be earned every day. That love isn't just something you receive. It's something you actively choose to give and nurture." We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about his therapy, his volunteer work, and his slowly developing understanding of healthy relationships. He told me about a woman he'd met at a community gardening project, someone who valued family, who'd actually asked him about his relationship with his mother on their second date. "She said that how a man treats his mother tells you everything you need to know about his character," Tyler said with a rueful smile. I had to admit that my recent track record wasn't exactly impressive. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that I'd failed as a son, that I'd let someone manipulate me into treating you terribly, and that I was working to become someone worthy of your forgiveness." "And what did she say to that?" "She said that recognizing your failures is the first step toward growing beyond them, but that the real test would be whether I could sustain the effort to change when it got difficult." As the afternoon sun began to set over the lake, Tyler prepared to leave. We stood on the front porch, looking out over the peaceful neighborhood where I'd found such contentment. "Mom," he said, "I know I have no right to ask this, but do you think someday we might be able to have the kind of relationship we had when I was little? Before I became so selfish and entitled?" I considered his question carefully. "Tyler, I don't think we can go back to what we had before, because that relationship was built on me giving everything and you taking it for granted. But I think we might be able to build something new, something based on mutual respect and genuine care for each other's well-being." "I'd like that," he said quietly. "I'd like that very much." "Then keep doing the work," I said. "Keep going to therapy, keep learning to be independent, keep choosing to be kind even when it's not convenient. And remember that earning someone's trust back is a marathon, not a sprint. After Tyler left, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, reflecting on how completely my life had changed since that terrible Thanksgiving dinner. I thought about Aunt Cordelia's wisdom in giving me not just money, but the insight to see who truly cared about me when they thought I had nothing to offer. I thought about Dr. Brennan, Sarah Martinez, and Marcus Webb, the team of professionals who had helped me understand that I deserved better and given me the tools to protect myself. I thought about the friends I'd made through my volunteer work at the Millfield Women's Center, where I now helped other women navigate family manipulation and financial abuse. Most of all, I thought about the woman I'd become, someone who set boundaries, who chose herself when necessary, who understood that love without respect wasn't love at all. My phone buzzed with a text message from Rebecca, a friend from my book club. "Still on for dinner tomorrow? I'm dying to try that new recipe you mentioned." I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. Come at 6. I'll make extra so you can take some home to David." This was what my life looked like now, filled with people who valued my time, appreciated my efforts, and treated me like someone whose happiness mattered. It had taken me 59 years and a $5.2 million inheritance to learn that I was worthy of this kind of life, but I was grateful every day that I had finally figured it out. As the stars began to appear over the lake, I raised my wine glass in a quiet toast to Aunt Cordelia, to the wisdom that had saved me from a life of accepting less than I deserved, and to the beautiful truth that it's never too late to choose yourself. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some end with the far more important gift of self-respect. And sometimes, that's the most beautiful ending of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.